Hey friends, Phil here and welcome to another follow along drawing class. This one is with coloured pencils and we're going to be drawing this delicious looking cheeseburger. So this is an in-depth lesson. It's going to take you from a blank piece of paper all the way through to a nice finished drawing. And the best way to follow this is to watch a few minutes of my instruction, pause the video and then catch up to me. You'll find chapter markers in the description below, beneath the video, and I've split the lesson up into the various different textures and elements within the burger. So you've got a section for the bun, a section for the cheese, a section for the lettuce, and so on. And hopefully this is going to make it really easy for you to complete your drawing over several sessions, or even several days, instead of trying to have to do it all in one go, if that suits your schedule a bit better. You'll also find a link to download the reference photograph and my final drawing in the description below. Here's a few drawings from other newcomer students who have followed along with this class in the past, and they look pretty good to me. I'm sure your drawing can look just as good, maybe even better. If you're new to the Draw Awesome YouTube channel, consider giving us a subscribe. It really helps me, and I'm going to be adding lots more of these in-depth drawing classes over the coming weeks and months. I'll be covering lots of different mediums and subjects, things like pencil drawing, pen and ink drawing, pastel pencils, charcoal, and some more colour pencil lessons as well. And if you subscribe, you're not going to miss a thing. And just before I do let you tuck into this delicious looking cheeseburger, go and check out our free community, artcooler.com. It's a place where amateur and hobby artists of all different abilities can share their artwork, take part in monthly challenges, and follow more of my free drawing courses. We've got lots of special interest groups within Art Cooler, so whether you're into watercolour painting or coloured pencils or sketching, or even things like digital art, sculpture, textile art, loads and loads of different special interest groups where you're going to find and meet other like-minded people. Alright, enough chit chat from me, let's get you started on this lesson. Any questions or comments, pop them in the comments section below. Enjoy. Now in terms of the materials, I'm going to be using Faber-Castell Polychromos. They're my personal favourite, but there are lots of other great brands that will work just as well for a piece like this. You've got Prismacolor's Premier, you've got Derwent's Colour Soft, Caran d'Ache Luminance, if you're happy to remortgage for those. They're a great set of pencils too. The most important thing is that you just have a reasonable set size. So this is a set of 36. And so far, I've yet to find the subject matter that I can't take on with those 36 colours. It's going to happen one day, I'm sure. Maybe it's today. But the point is that 36 colours or a set size thereabouts will allow you to take on pretty much any subject matter that you want. The process is the most important thing, and that process is picking out some colours ahead of time for each of the different sections or each part of your subject, testing them on a little bit of scrap paper or to the side of your drawing, and then sticking with that selection. So that's the important thing, not the exact colours that I'm using today. The paper surface that I'll be working on is, well, it's obviously a grey toned as opposed to white. And I love working on a mid-tone paper, particularly grey. It's something I recommend everybody should try. I think once you have, you'll definitely then always have some grey paper available to you for all kinds of different coloured media. This one is by Strathmore. It's actually called Art Again, and it comes in a pad of a variety of different colours. You can see there, greys, some pinks, some lighter greys and blues, bluey greys. You can get it in different shades. But I normally work on Strathmore's grey toned paper, which is just grey. But I didn't have that available today, so I thought I'd give this one a try. It actually feels quite smooth, the same as their grey toned paper. And you do need a little bit of tooth with coloured pencil. But what I've found is, even though it feels quite smooth, there is definitely enough tooth on this to be able to layer a number of different layers with your coloured pencils. It does work quite well. The only other piece of equipment that I've got is my trusty friend, mechanical pencil sharpener. So definitely recommend one of these if you do any kind of photorealistic pencil drawing or colour pencil work. Works great with both types of pencils and will save you a lot of time compared to the little handheld sharpeners. And I find is a lot more reliable and a lot less wasteful than an electric sharpener. So they're the materials. What we're going to do now is just very, very quickly, I'm going to show you the drawing out process. It's a little bit different than what I normally do for other lessons. I'm going to take you through how I'm going to approach that for this particular lesson. And then after that, we can make a start and get stuck in to this tasty looking burger. Okay, so for the outline drawing, so getting that down onto your paper before you use your coloured pencils, what I try to always encourage is that you avoid tracing and you avoid using a grid. And the reason for that simply is that you will then enhance and improve your observational skills. If you can always find opportunity to practice those, They are what transcend all the different media, all the different subject matter, and they make you a more well-rounded, more complete artist. And at the end of the day, that's then going to allow you to become more creative, take on different styles, different types of art, and just have a lot more fun. This is no different, so I don't want you to trace and I don't want you to use a grid. This subject matter is really quite forgiving. It doesn't matter if the burger's a bit too wide or a bit too tall, if there's a bit too much burger comparative to bun, so on and so forth. It's not like a portrait where you've got to be really deadly accurate. So there's quite a nice margin for error in this one. Now, normally the way that I would suggest that you sketch anything, you know, whether it's a burger or anything else, is that you start general and you look at the basic overall shapes and then you break those down. So let's just bring in a white piece of paper just so it shows up a little bit more clearly. So what I would suggest typically is that you start with an overall sort of shape, you know, a square sort of shape, and then you maybe look at a midpoint. So that's the burger there is the midpoint, and then you can then start breaking this into the different layers. So you start nice and general, and then you're only gradually getting more specific. So then we've got the bun there at the bottom, and when you've got this kind of rough outline, then you can start the next stage, which is looking at these individual curves and contours, which you break into straight lines, because straight lines are easier to see and easier to judge than curves. You do the same for the burger there, so you look at the angles, and all this allows you to do is get everything nicely placed on the page. It's much easier to get your proportions correct this way, so it's great for, say, if you were drawing an animal study where proportion is quite important. We just put the tomato in there, so you get the idea. We just put the bottom of the bun in. So that's how I would normally suggest you go about a sketch or a drawing of this nature, whatever the subject matter might be. For this lesson, we're going to take a different approach. So for this lesson, you can, if you want to, just very lightly plot in where your overall burger is going to be, just so that you can firm up the size and the position of your drawing on your piece of paper. Okay, so you put that in, and then you could maybe put in a halfway point if you wanted to, a halfway line, just to see where that burger is and how that relates, just so it gives you a bit of a reference point as you're moving down the layers. But what we're going to do, and we'll do this with a white colour pencil, is we're just going to start with drawing out the top layer. Okay, so we'll draw out the top layer very lightly in the white colour pencil, and then we're going to render that to completion. And when we've rendered that to completion, we're then going to move on to drawing out the cheese, and then we'll render that to completion, then we'll move on to the burger, and we'll gradually progress down the drawing, but rendering each stage to completion. Now, it's a different way of doing things, but what you'll find is that when you spend so much time rendering in this top layer, it really kind of trains your eye and focuses your eye on your subject matter. And that then makes it easier to draw out the next layer quite accurately, because your eye is really kind of trained in and honed in onto your subject matter. The other advantage of doing kind of minimal drawing and only doing it as you work through is that it keeps your drawing paper quite clean. If you're working in the normal style that I would suggest, so this one here, where you kind of start in general and get more specific, you've got quite a lot of erasing to do, and colour pencils don't erase the best. And you're starting to disturb some of the tooth of the paper, maybe more than you want to, with a more delicate medium like coloured pencils. So follow along with me. I think you'll be pleasantly surprised at how easy it is to draw this out so that it looks really kind of authentic and quite realistic. If you really feel that you must trace, what I would try and do is maybe lay some white coloured pencil down on the back of your reference photograph and then trace down with that as opposed to graphite. It's just going to work a little bit easier with the coloured pencils on top of it. Okay, so that's really all the proprietary work that we need to do. We're going to look at some of the colours as we go through each layer, and we'll have a little scrap piece of paper to do that. So if you get your materials ready, get them to hand, we can make a start. All right, so let's start with the bun on the top. And I'm going to draw this out with a white coloured pencil. And I'm going to try and keep it roughly the same size as the reference photograph. So I don't need, because it's quite forgiving as a subject matter, I don't need to get this the exact same shape. We'll just aim at getting something approximate. So I'm thinking that the size of the reference would probably work quite well on camera, I think. And it's also a nice size that allows me to get quite a bit of detail in there, but without it taking me tens of hours to complete. Now I've got a kneaded eraser here, and just to show you that when you work quite lightly with your colour pencil, the kneaded eraser will lift that out pretty much back to the paper surface. And the good thing, of course, about a kneaded eraser is that it won't damage the paper surface too much. A vinyl or a plastic eraser will give you a bit more erasing power, so to speak, but it can disturb the tooth fibres a little bit too much and just damage your paper more than you'd want to. So what about colour selection? So I've got a little scrap piece of paper here. You could just use the side of your paper. So this is just going to allow me to put some colours down and test them out. So what I'm looking for is just 3 or 4 colours that are going to allow me to render this area. Now, in terms of the seeds on top of the bun, those in the reference photograph are quite small, quite bitty. It's quite a complicated pattern. So I'm going to go for something a bit more stereotypical, if you like. You'll see that in a moment. But in terms of the colour, exactly the same. So I'm going to use a white for those. And so that is our first and most obvious colour. It's one that I use pretty much in every colour pencil drawing that I do. The next colour that I can see in this area are some yellows, particularly in this bottom area around here. And it's kind of a lighter, creamier yellow. There's a few of them that I could go for in the Polychromos range and that I'm sure would work. I'm going to go for this one just because it's the lightest yellow available. There we go, and I think that'll work quite nicely. And then, of course, we've got the bulk of the bun, which is this sort of beigey tan colour, light brown colour. I am anticipating that I'm going to have to mix whatever colour I choose with a little bit of white just to tint it down, just to take some of the vibrancy away from the colour straight out of the tin. So I'm just going for this one here. This is the burnt ochre. So it's kind of a tan brown colour, quite a bit of red in it. I think that works quite well. It looks quite nice. Another one that I've got available, which has got less red in it, is the raw umber. So you can see that they're both quite a strong, quite a vibrant colour, probably a little bit too vibrant. So what we're going to have to do is mix a little bit of the yellow in. Let's see what that looks like. So just laying some on the top there, and then possibly some white as well. So this is the testing out that I'm doing ahead of the drawing. I definitely don't want to be doing this while I'm midway through my drawing at any stage. I want to take some time to do this before I get started. So all I'm trying to do is just get a sense of which colour I prefer. This one here or this one here. I'm not looking for an exact colour match. So I could go with either, but I think this one is just a little bit nicer, a little bit warmer, and a bit closer to what we see in the reference. So we've got our white, our yellow, and burnt ochre. Now you might choose different colours to me. You're going to have different colours available in the set that you have. And that's the most important thing, that you choose what is available. You don't obsess over picking exactly the same colours that I have. So I'm just going to choose one more colour, and that's just if I want to bring up the value around here, bring up the colour, strengthen that value a little bit. I can also see these little creases and markings within the bun that are going to need a darker, stronger value. So I've got this darker brown. This is the walnut brown. It's quite a nice colour, this one, because it is quite neutral. It's quite a grey brown. It sits quite well on top of other colours. That looks quite nice on top of that one. It may be that this brown here actually sits better and it is maybe not too dark. Maybe that's all we need to create the darker tones and the darker values. So I think I'll actually stick with this one for the darker tones. Now, I mentioned just about these seeds on the top and how we can simplify them. So what I'm going to attempt to do is just think about the typical seed and the typical pattern on top of a burger bun. Let's just make sure the pattern is, quite random. Okay, so just go for that sort of shape there. And then if the light source is coming from this side here, I can add the shadows onto the left and possibly a little bit underneath as well. And then let's add a little bit of yellow over the top because they're not going to be, this stark white colour. A little bit of yellow just to knock the brightness of that white back a bit. All right, so with those colours to hand, let's get colouring in. So generally speaking, with coloured pencils, working light to dark. So I'm going to start with the white. And I'm going to look for the lightest areas within this top bun here. So anywhere that I can see the lighter bits of the bread and the dough, And I'm using, hopefully you can see this, I'm using quite light pressure. There's plenty of paper surface still showing through. The last thing that I want to do is use lots of pressure, which pushes the pencil into the fibers of the paper, into the texture of the paper. Any subsequent colours, subsequent layers are just going to skid off the top of that white. They're not going to stick to the paper and they're not going to show up. So I've got to use quite light pressure. I'm holding the pencil and I'm applying the same kind of pressure that you would do when you were brushing your teeth, just to give you a bit more of a concrete idea of how that actually feels. So I'm adding more pressure on this side here because obviously this side is in more light. So I know the final colour is going to be lighter. I'm not going to have to put as many layers over the top. So a little bit more pressure on this side. If you do struggle seeing where the lighter and the darker areas are within your reference, then make it black and white. That'll make it much easier. Or the alternative is to squint down, squint your eyes, defocus them, and that will take a lot of the colour away and the lights and the darks will become more apparent. So as I defocus my eyes, as I squint down, I can see that this area around here is really quite light. Okay, so what I want to do now is just start picking out some little indications of these seeds. Point of the pencil, lots of pressure. We're not going to want anything over the top of these. I can imagine they're going to be quite varied both in their position and in their sort of angle as they've just been sprinkled over the top. So I'm going to try and keep them relatively small, but obviously they're a lot bigger than what we see in the reference. So it's going to be a lot quicker, a lot easier than trying to recreate that pattern. To keep the pattern truly random, we want to have maybe some clusters, 2 or 3 together here and there, then some others on their own individually. We'll put a couple just on the outer edge as well, just to kind of break that line, just to show that they are sat on top of the bun, not within it. All right, I think that's enough. So our next lightest colour then is the yellow, this creamy yellow. If I didn't have a yellow this light available to me, I would just use the yellow that I had, the lightest yellow that I had available, maybe use a little bit less pressure, and then we'd blend that in, mix it with a little bit of the white. You can see I'm just weaving in and out of these little seeds that I've put down, but in terms of that pressure, it's pretty much the same as the white. So lots of paper surface still showing through. I don't want to push the pencil into the tooth just yet. Where you get to an area like this where there's a bit more white underlayer, you've got to use a little bit more pressure just to get it to show up, but you will get a feel for that as you're moving around your drawing. So I'm just going to continue this process all throughout the bun area, the top bun area, and then we'll come back in a moment and look at the next colour. All right, so the next colour then is the burnt ochre, and it's this tan brown, this reddy brown that we've got. And again, light pressure. Just see how it sits and how it grabs onto the surface now that you've got 2 colours down already. What you'll find is that because there are those 2 layers already there, it's not going to sit as well. You'll start to feel it skidding and sliding across the paper surface a little bit more. You're going to get these inconsistencies in the marks, and it can leave a bit of an unsightly kind of look and feel to the rendering that you're doing. But don't worry about that. It's only towards the end when you start to use a lot more pressure that everything then will start looking neater, more in keeping with the smooth texture that you're trying to recreate and the photorealistic look that you're going for. So light pressure overall, but I can just vary how much that is or how light that is depending on the area that I'm working in. So this area here, I'm starting to use more pressure, filling more of the tooth of the paper, but this area around the bottom, I don't want much of this tan colour at all. So I'm going to take this pencil all the way through, all over, and then we'll come back in and we'll look at the next process. All right, so just coming to the end of that layer there with the brown, the nice tan brown. And what you can see at the moment is that it all looks quite light, it looks quite insipid, and it certainly doesn't have the value or any kind of form, any kind of solid form that represents either the photograph or that photorealistic style that we're trying to achieve. What I can do now is start fixing the colours in certain areas. And all that means is I can start committing to both the colour and the value that I want within certain areas of this bun on the top. So I'm just going to pick up the 3 pencils I've used so far, have them to hand so that I can swap quite quickly between them as I need to. And all I'm going to do is basically repeating the process, starting with the yellow here, but just using more pressure. So I've gone with the yellow first for no other reason than I think it's a good colour for this area, and I just want to see how that looks as I now step up that pressure, as I now push more of the colour into the paper. The most important thing that I'm looking at here is not the colour match, but the value. So if I defocus my eyes, how does it compare value-wise, the lightness or the darkness, how does that compare to the reference? It's not full pressure, so I'm not really digging the pencil in like I did with those seeds, because as soon as I do that, then I'm not getting anything over the top. So it's not absolutely this full pressure, it's maybe 80%, 70, 80%, and certainly quite a bit more than I used on those previous layers. I'm going to go to the white now, and I'm just going to apply this really, really firmly around this area here. And what you'll find is that it doesn't feel like it's doing much at all. So you've got to then increase the pressure even more. Now I'm like 90%, maybe even or close to 100%, and it only just starts to show up. But that's fine, that's great. It's a subtle change that we're looking for because I'm quite happy with the colour and the value. So all I want really is to just smooth out those colours that I've put down. So let's go back to the yellow and carry on out, so more around this area here. Little circular motions as well. Those little circular motions really help to evenly push the colour into the paper. Okay, let's switch to the tan brown and let's start adding some more of that colour into it. It needs a lot more of that colour, particularly on this left-hand side. As we gradually move further back or further to the left, there's more of this colour. It's a darker value, so we use more pressure. Okay, what about this area down here? It's quite light. It's got a lot of white and very light yellow in there. What that's going to do, what it's going to help with, is give a nice contrast between the cheese below, the shadow that's within that cheese. I know the cheese at this stage, you might think it's yellow, but there are actually some quite dark values, some dark browns and greys in there. The white against that, I think, is going to look quite nice. Okay, and then with the white, just as I did on the right-hand side, I'm going to use this more as a burnishing tool to bring all those colours together. So just use the amount of pressure that you feel is needed to get rid of those, maybe those unsightly kind of blemishes and marks, the textural marks that you don't want there. All right, now I do think I need to bring up the value just on this far left-hand side, and I don't think I'm going to get much of a stronger value or stronger dark with this tan-coloured brown pencil. So it will go a little bit stronger, but I don't think that's quite strong enough. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use that other colour that I mentioned in the colour selection, that raw umber, and I'm just going to see if this will subtly but very definitely bring up the outermost edge, the far left-hand edge where the least amount of light is catching this top surface. And a point to note, while we do want to create this smooth gradation from light to dark, there are going to be obviously little variations in texture, little creases and dips that are going to change the values very, very slightly throughout the surface. So, I mean, a good example, look at these little creases here, these little marks. What I can do is, going back to the tan pencil, the burnt ochre, is it? Yeah, the burnt ochre. What I can do is just really dig the point of the pencil in to create the shape of the indentation, and then just run the pencil over the top just to soften that edge. Soften that mark. And then we've got one that runs off here. So digging the pencil in to create your shape. And then just soften that ever so slightly. All right, so just doing a little bit more work while I've got this pencil to hand. And what you can do when you spot them, if you see any of these other very subtle indentations and dips, you can just, as you're working your pencil around, you can just work it a little bit firmer in some areas and then lift off, and just so you're creating a nice bit of subtle variety. Obviously, you don't need to get these patterns exact. You're just looking at your reference and then trying to get a feel for what that is and recreate something similar on your own paper. Okay, and so just a little bit of detail in them. So if we look at these indentations, these cracks, just underneath the darkest area there, the dark crevice, you've got this lighter highlight edge. And although we've put quite a bit of colour down already, I will get, with quite a lot of pressure, I will get this slightly lighter edge with the white pencil. And that's all you want it to be. You want it to be slight and you want it to be subtle. And then right in the centre, so in the, not towards the outer edges, but more in the middle, we want to just create a darker area. So this is the darker brown pencil. Definitely a good idea to have a sharp pencil for this, even maybe sharper than the one I've got at the moment. I'll just give you a bit more control. So just trying to create a little bit of extra darkness in the middle, more towards that centre, less towards the outer edges. Anywhere else we can add a few of those stronger darks? What about some shadow here, and look at that little outline edge there. So just again, with the point of the pencil, creating this jaggedy edge to describe the nature of this little tear, this break in the bread. A little bit stronger just around here. So look at that area there, just how it's a little bit stronger. Okay, a few last points just before we move on from the bun. So we need to put some shadows in for these seeds, but I also want to create a bit of an edge, a bit of an outline edge along the bottom. Now normally you don't want to outline things not with realism, but when you've got something next to your outline, so in this case it's the cheese, the layer beneath, and we've got that next to the outline, I know that the outline that I create, I'm going to be able to subtly blend that into the layer beneath. So ultimately it won't look like an outline. Now if you look really closely, you can see that in parts of this, you've actually got a lighter edge. It's actually lightest right at the bottom there. You see those kind of light edges that describes almost the crumbly nature of the bottom of the bread where it's been cut. So what I'm going to do with a nice sharp white colour pencil is just create this jaggedy edge. I just want the very thinnest of lines, thinnest of edges, just along this bottom edge here. And then same thing on the far right hand side as well. What this isn't is a strong, really thick outline. So you're not just getting the pencil and lazily running it the whole way across the bottom of the bun from right to left or left to right with this kind of quite thick edge. That's going to ruin the entire effect. And then we can go to this mid-brown, so the raw umber. And underneath that thin white line, that thin white edge, I'm just going to outline, and you can see how hard I'm pressing. That'll happen a lot. So I'm just going to outline underneath where I've added the white. Okay, now for the shadows on these little seeds. So I want to go with the lightest of the browns first, so this tan colour. You don't want to go in just with a really strong brown and get overzealous with the shadows. Now we know that the light is obviously coming from the right, so the shadows are all going to be to the left of the seeds, slightly underneath as well. And of course these shadows you can use to help define the shape of the seed. So if some of them are a little bit too big or you just feel are the wrong shape, use this shadow line just to help refine that till you're happy with it. And can you see how I'm starting in the centre as well? So I haven't just gone straight into the lightest side, the right hand side, or the darker side, the left hand side. By going for the middle, I can get a better judgment of how this shadow tone looks. I can then make it lighter, use less pressure or a lighter colour on the right, use more pressure and a darker colour on the left. So as I start to move into the lighter areas, into that side, I'm definitely feeling that I need to use less pressure with this particular pencil. You still need to create that shadow, but it's just a softer tone. Okay, and then with the darker brown, this raw umber. Again, nice sharp point. So you're just strengthening the shadows on that shadow side. Okay, so the very last thing to do then is just to tone down the colour of some of these seeds. So at the moment they're all bright white, and I think they need a little bit more yellow in them. In this side, one or two, I don't mind if they're going to be white because so much light might be hitting them that they do come up as white. So we'll just add a little bit of yellow on the right hand side here. As I get round the centre, definitely more yellow, so definitely a bit more pressure on top of that white that I've already put down earlier on. I can add the yellow to this left hand side too, but these do need to be darker. Okay. So what I'm going to do is take that raw umber and then lightly at first, just see how the pencil sits on top. You don't want to go in, really strong and then find that you get rid of all the white and you can't see them. So just start light, add the pressure. It's much easier to increase the pressure than it is to try and erase too dark a mark. All right, so I think that's all I need to do on the burger bun. With a little bit more time, I could burnish and blend these colours together even more smoothly, so get rid of even more of the texture. You can do that if you want to, but I think in the context of the entire drawing when it's finished, I think that'll look quite nice. So let's move on now and look at the cheese. All right then, so moving on to the cheese. So let's draw this out first and foremost. So I'm using the white pencil again, and all I'm looking for are the points at which the cheese meets the burger bun. So just looking at the shapes. So I've got this piece that comes down here. So I'm just looking at that as a little negative shape there. And then I'm just looking at how closely, what the distance is. And because you spent quite a lot of time focusing on this, looking backwards and forwards at your reference photograph, I think you'll find it's surprisingly easy to judge the positions and the shape of each layer beneath. So starting with this cheese. So I'm just looking at the angle there. It really doesn't matter if you're kind of off with that, because nobody's going to know. You know, it could be anything, the way that this melted cheese falls, but it's just a good habit and good practice to get into for your observational skills. So we've got this bit that comes off here, and then it's kind of oozing down the side there over the top of that burger, and then this bit comes around here. There we go. Okay, so colour selection. Let's bring this piece of paper back in again. So I've got a number of different yellows available to me. So the one that I've already used for the burger bun at the top is this one here. So it's a kind of a creamy yellow. It's not really a vibrant yellow. We've got this one, which is right at the other end of the scale. So that's too much of a luminous. There's too much green in that. So I'm definitely going to leave that one to the side. This is more of a canary yellow. I quite like that one. I think that will work quite well blended with the white. So we'll definitely keep that one. We've got more of a, I'm going to say a cheese yellow, so let's definitely keep that one as well. I think that will work quite well. This one is an orange. I think that's a little bit too orange, so we'll leave that one to the side. And we've obviously got the white that we can use, but what about the darker tones? So look around the bottom of the bun there. Can you see that bit? So we need some dark tones for that. So let's just pull in the two browns that we had before. So these are preferable for me than grey, just because I think grey will flatten the colour a little bit. If I just take the grey and put it over the top of the yellow, it even makes it a little bit greeny as well. So I think a kind of a more neutral brown is good for that. So we'll use that one there. That was the raw umber, and this one is the walnut brown. So this is the one that I didn't use on the bun area. It's quite a neutral, quite a pastel colour. So I quite like that one as well. I think that'll be good right for in those darkest dark areas, darkest darks as they appear on the cheese, that is. I think that will be good to use over the top. So there's 4 pencils for the cheese. If we include the white as well, that's going to be 5. So as we did before, starting from lightest to darkest, what I want to do is put in the highlights. So I'm just looking for where those highlights, strongest highlights are, and I want to put these in with as much pressure as possible. So nice strong pressure. You can see how well that's showing up. It just fades out there. And we've got this one on this part of the cheese here as it goes around the corner and then into this little section here. So by putting these in first, there's no chance then that we can forget about them later on. And there's a more muted one on the top there. There's a little highlight edge I can just see coming around into this. This is maybe a bit higher. Okay, and then look at this area here. So this is lighter, isn't it? So I'm just looking at that area there. Maybe could do it with being a bit bigger. So all of this is lighter. So I'm just going to block that in for now. A bit stronger here. Okay, and then with the lighter of the two yellows, so this is the cadmium yellow. Let's start to block in some colour. So lighter pressure at first. Don't want to commit to anything just yet. So I'm just going to run this all over the entire area where there's cheese, over these kind of lighter highlights, but not the brightest one. And let's just add a little bit of the other yellow in, this cheesy yellow, as I was calling it. Again, light pressure to begin with. So we're just looking to get some initial colours and tones down, just to start getting rid of the paper surface. What I can do now is look for any areas that I feel like I can commit to a little bit more. So I'm just going to pick out an area that's not a highlight like this, but it's not a shadow. So somewhere in between this area here, and I'm just going to work on that a little bit more. So these circular motions, a little bit more pressure, just to add a bit more tone down, just so I can feel and find what the right colour is. So this is feeling a little bit too bright. Could probably drop that pencil altogether, that cadmium yellow, and stick with this one, which is the dark Naples ochre. So let's just work that one in a little bit more. If I need this one to be a bit lighter, I can add some of the white over the top of that, some of the white into the mix. Let's do that now just to see how it goes. So just trying to push this into the paper surface. There's a bit more yellow here. Can you see how the lightest part of the highlight, if we zoom in there, see it's a bit more yellow here, lighter here, lightest part is around here. There's no hard edges though. This one is perhaps, there's a hard edge there. This is a soft edge. So from this lighter area to this less light area, that's kind of a soft blend into that edge. But we've got a bit more of a harsh shadow shape just there. So the white, let's just build that up. So you can see just by combining the white and yellow there, I've used a bit more pressure here just to create that lightest area there. And then just releasing the pressure, blending with a bit of yellow just to soften that off. And then this area, a bit more pressure again. I want to bring that up. I'm definitely going to be putting some browns into this where it's a kind of a deeper, stronger colour. There we go. And then nice sharp point on the pencil. Look at this light highlight that runs into this bit here. It's only quite subtle, but I think it's a nice touch if you can get it in. So sharp point of the pencil, and just running it into this area here. There's another one just beneath it. So just in the same way as this area here, I'm just looking for any hard and soft edges. So this is quite a hard edge here, certainly around this point. And then there's a hard edge at the top of this little highlight. But then around here, it all starts to become lost edge. Around this area, the technique and the patterns are just the same. So a bit more pressure for the yellow in the shadow area, not full pressure because I want to put some brown in there. Looking for any soft edges so it lightens off into this area. If it starts to feel a bit too white, you can just add a bit more yellow. If it starts to feel a bit too yellow, you can just add a little bit more white. Little tiny highlight edge there, just about to see. All right, let's get a few of those darker tones in, a few of those darker browns. So let's go with the burnt ochre, the raw umber. And again, less pressure to begin with, just get a feel for how the pencil adheres to the colour beneath it, the layer that you've put in. So these small circular motions, just starting off closest to the burger bun, and then you can gradually ease that out. It's going to need to be quite a bit darker than this, but this is good as a first layer. You can see how far you can take that out. So just increasing the pressure around this area where I can see a little shadow. Just looks like where there's two bits of cheese overlapping each other. And also just a little bit of tone just into this area here. And what I don't know if you can see that, but what you'll definitely see and feel when you're doing this for yourself is that this darker colour, if you've got quite a lot of yellow underneath,
just doesn't sit very nice on top. But it's okay because you can, as long as you get some colour down, even if it's showing quite a lot of uneven texture and patterning to it, you can burnish that together with the yellow by going over with the yellow, or even the white will work nicely. All right, so back with that yellow then. Let's see if we can just tie that in together. So just in the areas that you want your final colour to be, you can use lots of pressure. Okay, so having done that, let's go in then with this walnut brown. So the rule is the same applies, less pressure, just to see how the pencil sits. So this is, I think, an area where people wouldn't go dark enough. I mean, it's not black, but, or even a dark grey, but it's a stronger colour, and I think you'd see a lot of more newcomer artists use. So that outline that I did earlier when I did the bun, I'm just going to strengthen that. So strengthening it with this walnut brown, so it's just the thinnest edge that I can then tease out just to help define this sort of jaggedy edge. All right, when you feel you've got a reasonable amount of that colour down, let's take the yellow and let's just push that right into the paper surface. So lots of pressure, essentially using this now as a burnishing tool. All right, there's one last thing that I want to do, and that is just to create a bit of a rounded edge around the bottom. And that's quite simple. So we're going to do the same kind of thing as we did with the burger bun. So we're just going to take this raw umber pencil, so I keep forgetting the name of for some reason. So I'm just going to outline the bottom and then just take a bit of tone upwards. So around here, we're just going to outline the bottom so you can cut into it where it kind of cuts into the texture of the cheese at the bottom. And then just ever so slightly, just take a little bit of tone up. Just helps to create this rounded edge. And if you can maybe just dig the white pencil just on the very top edge of that. Just to help increase the kind of sense of this roundness around this bottom here, this bottom part. So outlining the bottom bit and then just taking a bit of tone up. Do that all the way around. Okay, now that cheese is going to stand out a lot better. It's going to really lift when we get the nice strongs of the burger in. So let's take a look at that layer. So sticking with the white pencil again then, let's draw this out. So we've got this side here. It's quite a thin edge, isn't it, here? Thinner area around this bit. And then just cutting in. And we've got the kind of bulk of the meaty bit comes around here. And then we've got this angle, definite angle to it, running in this direction. A little bit just jutting over the top there. And then this bit seems to come out here. And then let's take this bit down. Bit of a straight edge. So somewhere around about there, I would say. The shape of my bun's slightly different. It's a little bit flatter than that one. But looks like the burger's going to come around about here. Putting these straight edges in definitely helps, you know, rather than just trying to draw this single straight line. And then I'm just going to put a bit of an indication in for where it looks like this sort of thick edge of the burger is, and where this burnt crisp top edges. There we go, and a bit of a piece of onion in there, just a little bit of texture. There's another bit in there as well, maybe another bit of onion just about, it's going to be around about here, isn't it? This probably needs to be a little bit lower down, maybe somewhere there. There we go, that's a bit better. We've got this piece of an onion just about here. All right, so colour selection. Let's get the piece of paper back in, flip it over. So I can see, obviously we can definitely see a red, kind of a purpley red in there, and then there's some blacks for the burnt pieces as well. I think it's always good from continuity point of view if you can use some of the colours you've already used. So let's see if we can pull those browns in as well. So the first colour I want to pick out is this kind of magenta colour. So this is actually called magenta. So I think that's going to work quite well for the actual kind of meaty colour that's in there. Let's just get a bit more of a, let's say a reddy colour. I think that's maybe a little bit too red. I think that could work, but I think that one's just got a nice bit of kind of blue in there, a bit more purpley colour. This one's too purple. That might work quite well for the red onion, but I think for the meat that's too purple. So I'm going to go with the magenta, and then I definitely want the black for those burnt bits. I think the brown will work well together with those, and I think the yellow that we've used for, could be either one of the yellows, but let's go with the yellow that we've used for the cheese, maybe just for some of the spots that are in there. And have we got that reddy brown? So we want the reddy brown that I used for the top of the burger bun. So again, just for continuity purposes, I think those 5 colours will work quite nicely. So let's put in the lights of any little kind of bits and pieces that you can find within the meat. So these bits of onion here. So a little bit of yellow in there, just so we don't lose them. Got the white of this onion here. Put a little bit of white in that as well. Now what I want to do, can you see how this side here, we just zoom in on that. See how it's got a lot of these white highlights? If you defocus your eyes, you've got a kind of a pattern here of lights and then a few here. And you've also got them, a few spots around here and there. So it's important that we get these in before we start to put in the darks of the magenta and the black. Otherwise we've got no chance. And I want to avoid trying to put them in with, you know, after the fact with acrylic paint. So what I'm going to do, just in much of the same way as I did the seeds on the bun, I'm just going to create some random haphazard marks that are in a very rough sort of pattern and shape as the highlights as I see them. I don't need to get them exact by any means. So there's going to be a few that are a bit more like dots, a few slightly larger ones. Many of them will probably lose when we've got to put some more of the colour on. But overall, this area around here is lighter. So if we just dust some of the colour pencil across, maybe a few more highlights just in this bit. So this whole area here is lighter, and by putting this white down now, when we put the red and the black on top of that, it's not going to show up as dark as it will do in other areas where we've not put the white down. So let's maybe pick out a couple of highlights here and there. So I'm just kind of defocusing my eyes and I'm seeing how this area is lighter. You see how that area is lighter? This is in shadow around here, but this bit is definitely lighter. What this base layer of white is going to do is just make the colours that sit on top of it a bit more of a pastel-y, bit more of a milky colour. All right, let's go in with some of that magenta. So even though most of this up here is black, I definitely want some of this colour to be showing through. And then we're going to run this through into this area here. See the effect that that white has had already. So around this area here, just want to dodge in between the brightest highlights. because I do want to retain those, or some of them at least. All right, and then let's take this walnut brown. So this is the dark brown. In fact, let's just put a little bit of the lighter kind of reddy brown. It was the, where are we, the burnt ochre, just in a few spots. Again, just for a bit of continuity, pull all the colours together. I don't want a lot of this colour in, but it's just going to help vary it from being that one solid pink colour. All right, so the darker brown then, we can start to define the bottom of this cheese area. I'm not using completely full pressure here, but I am using more pressure obviously than I've used so far. So this is just going to act as an underlayer to the black. So I don't want to go straight in with the black because I think that will create too much of a flat tone. And if you look as well, there's some black areas around here, but look at that colour there. Can you see how that's not jet black? It's got darker values around it, so it can't be jet black. This is around here, but very few of these blacks are completely black. They've got lighter areas within them. I'm actually just going to put a little bit of white in there just because there's quite a few little highlights on that piece around there. So lighter pressure around here, lighter pressure all around here. Just trying to dance the pencil around as well. So I'm starting to get into this feel for the way that the textures are, and just make a movement with the pencil that is representative of that. So I'm thinking about as well how it's definitely darker around this bottom edge here. It's got this natural curvature to it. So I'm going to be laying down some darker browns and reds around this bottom. This is going to be the lightest area through the centre here, the lightest highlights. And we definitely want it darker all the way through the bottom. At this stage, all I'm doing is just adding in little bits of brown as and where I feel it needs it, but again, not the full pressure or anything like it just yet. Okay, let's go back with that red magenta. So can we start to put in some stronger colours? It's a very vibrant colour, this, quite a what you would call staining colour. So you just got to be careful you don't put too much in. So all I'm doing now is I'm just spending a bit more time thinking about and getting into the feel of texture. So rather than just going all the way over and these quite smooth, quite uniform strokes for say the burger bun, here I'm trying to just create areas of stronger tone, dancing the pencil around, creating areas of lighter tone. More pressure towards the bottom. As I mentioned before, that's going to be darker around that bottom area there. Okay, maybe a little bit of white just to, again, mute that. And look at as well how there's lots of different textural pieces within the burger. So you've got these little white flecks here. You can start to pick out some of those. If you leave it right to the very end, you might not be able to do that with the white. All right, maybe another pass with the brown. So again, just starting to pick out a few more individual bits and pieces. Start creating a definite bottom edge. This kind of burnt, crispy bottom edge to the burger there. Little bits and pieces that are coming off it. Any little dark spots that you can see. So shadow there, down into this area is all in shadow. And then what you've left with is this lighter area here and this lighter edge here. And it doesn't need to be by any means exactly as is on the reference photograph. And don't worry too much about how this is looking, how it's progressing. It's only when you bring, as is so often the case, only when you bring everything together with the strongest darks that it all kind of ties together and makes sense. It's easy to get a little bit despondent and almost feel like you want to give up because you think it's not going right, when really you just need to continue on, just be patient, add in those strong darks, and that ties everything together. Just add a little bit of colour, just add a little bit of nice reddy brown to this onion here, just to show that it's kind of like a burnt onion. All right, time for the black. So again, starting closest to this cheese and just redefining the outline with the black first, and then you can tease this out. Just leave the odd little area just of the red and the brown layer that you've put down before it, just to show through, so it's not kind of a solid black colour. The beauty of putting these colours down first is that it will prevent the black from looking very flat and very kind of dull, which a lot of people will say you shouldn't use black because it kills a painting. And it does if you just use it on its own and it's not used in conjunction with other colours either mixed into it or in this case that are underneath it. But I don't think there's anything wrong with using black at all. It's a colour along with white that I use a lot in coloured pencils. And when you've got colours underneath it, essentially what you're doing is just turning those colours into a shade. A shade being any colour with black added to it. So I'm just looking for any areas that are either dark in value or that have got this kind of flatter black burnt colour to it. Not all of them are jet black, so just look at this one for example. So I'm looking at this one here, this around here. Can you see how they're not jet black at all? They've got a little bit of blue in them, but I'm not going to go to those lengths and start looking for a blue to put in there. But they're not black, they're not jet black. So if you can just reduce the pressure in areas slightly and then in other areas strengthen it, what you're going to get is these darks here. Let me go any closer. So you're going to get really dark darks here, lighter areas, darker darks, lighter areas. And as long as you can recognise that and make some effort to create a similar sort of pattern, you'll end up with hopefully something that looks quite believable. So look how around the bottom here, I'm just creating this outer edge, but then just fading it up into the rest of the burger. So you create this kind of softer edge, this gradual transition from a lighter area to a darker area. Got some nice dark tone just to this side of the onion. It's quite dark underneath here. This is quite dark, so this bit can stand out. And then around this area here, where we've left lots of whites for the highlight, we just need to refine those. So they're a little bit too big. So you just got to reduce the size of those. So what I would do is just use 3 pencils, the red, brown and black. And just go in and out of the highlight so you're only leaving the smallest little areas. So for example, there's a nice piece of dark shadow just in there. And then what I can do is just by dotting the pencil above and around it, it just helps to reduce the size of those highlights. You don't want them too big and too dominant. So just using the black sparingly here, just maybe at the bottom. So for example there, just the bottom of that particular shadow tone. Okay, and just take a step back, defocus your eyes, just look first and foremost for the form. So I think we need to go darker around this bottom bit here and really emphasize this is the lightest area, maybe darker around here. So just with the brown, taking it up. All right then, so let's move on to these tomatoes and this mayonnaise, or looks at more like Southwest sauce, a bit more pinky than mayonnaise would be. So let's choose some colours for those. So scrap bit of paper in again, and I've got a number of different reds available to me. So we'll try this first one. This is the deep scarlet red. And that is a little bit pinky for me, a little bit too much pink in there. This one is, I think this is the geranium, pale geranium lake. So that's got a little bit more yellow in. I think that's a bit more suitable. So that's a possibility. This is a darker, deeper red. This is the cadmium red. That might be useful for maybe some of the shadow areas. This tomato as well on the left-hand side, some of the shadows in there. So we'll keep hold of that one. And then this to me is quite an orange tone. So we could either use an orange, or what we could do is use one of the yellows that we've used previously and mix that with one of the reds. So that's making it a little bit pink. That's a bit too much of a white yellow, so maybe more of a kind of a canary yellow. So let's just see if that works. A little bit of the red down and a bit more of a canary yellow on top. So there you go, that's creating more of an orange hue. And then you can then lighten that with the white. And I think that would work quite well as well. Okay, so we've got 1, 2, 3 colours. We're going to need some shadow tones as well, so maybe we can add in that walnut brown as well, just for some shadow areas, and possibly might need the black as well. We'll come on to the Southwest sauce in a moment. Let's focus on the tomatoes for now. So, as ever, let's draw this out with the white pencil. And then with the white to hand, what I'm going to look at are the lightest areas. So let's zoom in on this, and you can see a nice light highlight area around here. So stronger, and then I'm just going to fade it off into this area. It's a little bit stronger here. So a nice bit of white through there. We've got this nice highlight around the edge there. So what I'm going to do is dig the pencil in, just the point of the pencil. So standing it upright as you can. There we go, just dig that in. We've got a little highlight edge just here. Digging the pencil in there. And this is a bit more of a creamy colour, isn't it, than a deep red. While I've got the white, let's put some highlights in for this Southwest sauce. Okay, and then we'll go in with, let's start with the red. So this is the lighter red of the two. So this is the pale geranium lake. This is the one that I thought was a little bit too pink. It is a little bit too pink for me, so I'm just going to leave that alone. I'm going to stick with just those 4 colours. So this is the deeper red. Maybe we can put in a light dusting of this in the darker area and then blend that with the orange. So only using this lightly because I want to get some of that nice orange in there. Just going to try and leave a thin highlight edge. Can you see that? Just between the 2 shapes. Go with this orange now. Let's get a little bit of that colour in. There we go. I think that's definitely going to be better, especially when we add the white. All right, with those 2 colours in place then, I can pick up the strength of the shadow area. So we're just looking at this area here now. And this area, this side is a little bit darker, but it is a bit more of a tangerine colour than a red colour. So I'm not going to do too much there. This is a bit paler. We've got a bit more shadow down the bottom there. There's a reflection of sorts here. See if we can get that in. I actually don't think there's a great deal of red in this. There we go. So those need lifting, those shadows need lifting with a darker colour. Maybe the brown will work for that. Okay, let's go to the white. So I think there's enough colour in this. I think it's a little bit dark, so that means we can just tone it down a bit with the white, start to blend and burnish the colours together. See how it looks. Does it look too pale? Does it need a bit more colour in? Maybe a touch more orange, I think. It really is very orange. That's the wrong one. So hopefully you can see what I'm doing there is I'm laying down a couple of different colours, so the red and the orange, just to try and get a nice tomato-like colour. And when I think I've got the balance of the colours right, I go over with the white to sort of burnish them together and give the correct value, so the correct amount of light and dark that I'm looking for. But if it turns out that putting that white on makes them too pale, too kind of a pastel colour, too washed out, I just add in a little bit more colour, whichever of those that it needs to be. In that case it was the bit more orange, and then I can just repeat the process, and hopefully this time I've got the balance of colours just right. Okay, I think that'll do. I think that's a fairly simple shape to put in. Maybe just a few darks for the inner parts of the shadow, so just where that source is creeping in. So this is just that walnut brown. I think it's a really nice shadow colour, particularly with the colours that we're working with today. It's quite a neutral colour, it's quite a grey brown, so it does act well as a shadow. All right, and then for this tomato, so very kind of similar colour, maybe a little bit less orange. So same process again. So laying down this red, but leaving plenty of the paper surface to show through, and then I'll add some orange, and then we'll just look to blend it together with the white. All right, and then for the Southwest sauce, quite an interesting colour. Not really sure how to deal with this one, but it's definitely kind of that creamy colour, isn't it? And if you think about how you'd make it, you know, how I would make Southwest sauce, it's a combination of mayonnaise and ketchup. So let's maybe put some white down and then some of this red. So that's quite pinky, that's too pink. If we then put in a little bit of canary yellow, or cadmium yellow, and then I'll burnish that together. It's almost like a flesh tone. Well, it is like a flesh tone. So I think it's going to be something along those lines. So maybe we just add a bit more yellow in, a bit more of that red. And then let's go the opposite direction just so you can see the effects. So really burnish them together. Probably needs a touch more yellow in, but I don't think that is too far off. There we go. So that's the colour we'll go with. This is the cadmium red, middle cadmium red it's called, and this is the cadmium yellow. So any kind of a red and yellow, you could maybe even try one of your oranges. There's one, and there's another one. And then the white on top of that, just to see how that works. That's not a bad colour. So that might be an easier, a quicker way to do things. That one's probably a little bit too yellow. So because it's quite what I would call quite a neutral, pastely, maybe even milky sort of a colour to it, you know there's a lot of white in there, in the mix. So that's what I'm going to lay down first. And then we'll go with the yellow next. So this is the cadmium yellow, quite a strong colour. Sits on really nice on top of that. And then let's do the red. So we've got to be sparing with this red because it is a really strong colour. Did want to avoid those highlights, but never mind, we can, because I've not used too much pressure, you can just pick those back out. Okay, so maybe a touch more red and yellow in places. And back over with the white just to pull those together. So not lots of pressure because I'm not sure whether I've got the right balance of red and yellow yet. That'll only show through as I add the white. But I think that's going to be enough colour if you look at the balance between, or the difference between the red and the sauce, there is a very clear, distinct difference. So I think that is going to work quite well. So once I've got that balance of colours together, then it's just a case of creating some form. So if we zoom in, you can see that there are these lighter areas and some darker shadow areas. Some of them are subtle, some of them, like these highlights, are more definite. So all I'll do is just increase the pressure in some areas. So this one, for example, here, to create that shape. So just creating that shape there, and then I can leave a bit of a gap and create the next one. Doesn't matter if they're not in the same place as the source on my reference. So really kind of a small area. You're limited with how much you can do here. All right, let's go with that trusty walnut brown. I'm just going to sharpen that, make sure I've got a nice point for some nice precision. And then just looking at the shadows, so look how they work with the lighter areas that you've put down. And in the corners, and just where it meets this, at the bottom of the burger, it is going to be really quite dark. All right, so we are limited with what we can do there, but what you might want to do is just put a few of these little black spots, so it's where obviously the burnt bits of the burger have just dropped down onto the tomato. So just put the brown in first, the walnut brown, and then we'll just add a bit of shadow just to the left-hand side. It's only very subtle. There's a little piece just on there. All right, I'm not sure how much that looks like actual sauce in and of itself, but in the context of everything else, it'll be fine, it'll look okay. So I'm going to use the same techniques again. So we're going to lay down the same colour combination, white at first, then I'll put some yellow on, then some red, burnish it all together with light pressure at first with the white to see that I've got the correct colour balance. And then when I have, I'm going to go in with some darker, stronger colour here, maybe some red and some yellow, then a bit of brown. Same for the shadows underneath. Make sure this area is lightest in the middle. And it does look as though there's maybe some bits in there, chives or something like that. So I've just got a green pencil, picked up the first one I came to, because what we'll do is put that in and then really kind of knock that back, mute it back with the brown. So there's a little bit there, maybe a touch here. And then just with the brown, the walnut brown that is. Tone that right down. The white as well, just to burnish it so it's got that smooth look to it. Okay, so moving on, let's have a look at the lettuce and the onions. So this, I would imagine, is going to be a little bit time consuming just to figure out the different shapes within the lettuce. You don't want to get too lazy here. It's quite tempting to kind of get maybe a little bit loose and a bit scruffy here, but I don't think that would work with the rest of the style. So let's just draw the shapes out first. So this onion shape, it's got a nice kind of white edge to it, so I can actually put this in a little bit more firmly. Could do with a sharper point on the pencil, mind you, which I will do in a moment. And then the bottom edge, how does it compare to the thickness of the tomato? It's a little bit thinner, isn't it? And then nice angle to it on this side. All right, and then our second onion, a little bit smaller. Again, just looking at the angles. So that's coming up under here, touches the tomato. Okay, and then the lettuce. So what we'll do is we'll draw the outer edge first. So we don't need to get this exact, but it's nice to kind of closely observe, as closely as you can, as you're drawing. Just don't obsess over getting it exact. Let's actually put the bun in while we're here. So I'm just looking at this as a shape and how much I need to leave. If you think the lettuce is going to get a little bit tedious, you could actually squash your bun up so less of it was showing through. Okay, so colours for the onion. This purple that I chose before, this magenta colour, which I think is actually called magenta. No, it's not. It's called mauve. Let's just try a more magenta colour. This one is called magenta. So this one is the one that we use for the meat, and I think that's quite nice. I think that works quite well. This is nice with the blue in as well. Look how well they work with the white when you put the white over them. I think we can actually use those two colours together and add a little bit of variety. So again, what we'll do is look for the lightest colours, or the lightest areas. I'm just going to add some vertical strokes. That's just in keeping with the patterning on the onion. So nice vertical strokes there. A little bit less pressure towards this part here because it's in the shadow. Look how light this one is. So definitely quite light around this centre area. And then there's this nice cast shadow. Not many cast shadows in this one, but the ones that you see, you definitely want to try and get them in. Okay, and then we'll try the magenta first. So again, not too much pressure to begin with. All about pressure. I know I keep mentioning it, but it's really is one of the most important techniques and one of the most important things to understand when working with coloured pencils. Pastel pencils as well. If you can understand the pressure and just hold back where you need to and increase it elsewhere, you'll make better artwork and you'll make it faster as well. So just adding in this mauve. I'm going to add more of this under here, just for the darker hue. Okay, and then vertical lines, hopefully just to pull all these colours together. A little bit of our walnut brown just to take the colour out in the shadow area. All right, and I think that's all it needs. So quite a quick and easy effect. Quite easy to create this semi-translucent, nice bright vibrant colours as well. So same thing, exactly the same thing on this side. Obviously we've got to put the shadow in as well, so we'll add a little bit of walnut brown in for that, but same process. So for the lettuce then, I'm running out of room here for my little colours, but again, you're just going to pick out a couple of different greens. I would say maybe 2 at most. So that's quite a nice one. It's quite an earthy green. It's got some yellow tones in. So maybe let's go for that one. And I'm not too keen on that one. It's a bit garish. That one's quite a nice one for maybe some of the vibrant greens. And then possibly this yellow as well. So the yellow that we used up the top there. But just pick no more than 2 greens. Any more than that is kind of overkill. It's going to complicate things a little bit too much. 2 greens and a yellow, and away we go. All right, so I'm just going to focus on this little area here. The rest of it is just repetition. So we'll work this area up, and then I'll do the rest off camera. You don't need to see me do all of that. So the way I'm going to approach this, I think, is to lay down this brighter green first. So this is like a viridian green. It's a light green, actually called light green. And I'm going to lay this colour in quite strongly because I think in the lighter areas, I think it works quite well. It's a really nice colour against the red, really stands out against that. So what I'm looking for, as always, are the areas of light and shade, light and shadow. And it's best to work maybe on a little section at a time because it's going to be quite easy to get lost with all the different patterning that's going on in there. All right, and then with the darker green, so this is the pale green yellowish, it's called, in the Faber-Castell range. What this allows me to do then is just to start putting in some shadows. So we've got this sort of cylindrical shape here, and then it's a nice dark shape within this piece. In fact, let's do all of that. There's a dark shape there, let's go across there. And then a nice dark area inside. We're going to have to lift that with the brown, possibly even the black as well. So if you want to go to the trouble, you can sort of negatively reserve some of the little veins that you can see. Depends on how much you want to put into this. From a layering point of view, this is actually quite easy. You can use quite a lot of pressure straight from the start. The colours do work well together. All right, and then with the brown, so this is the walnut brown. Gently at first, you can just start to tease out some of the tones. So you want to be darkest right towards the shape, so darkest here, and then gradually easing off. Again, if you want to go to the trouble, you can maybe leave some of the veins showing through, an impression of those. You can draw those in negatively, so you're just reserving the space. Some nice strong dark in this area. So these little thin edges at the moment are too dominant. They're too thick, they're too bright. So you don't want to go overboard with these. They need to be in the context of everything else. So you're going to have to thin them down and maybe even in places run some of the green colour over it. If you find that because you've pushed the pencil in quite sharply that any green that you run over the top just runs past it, if you get a nice sharp point on your pencil and just put the pencil right into that crevice, it will pick up some of the colour and then it will just knock anything that's too bright, too strong, it will just knock that back. All right, and then just before I move on to the rest, I'm going to get the black and just show you how, just being a flatter tone, I actually think that's going to work better than the brown. I think you could probably skip the brown and go straight to the black and just use it very, very lightly. Just build it up rather than trying to get it right first time. Very, very lightly, and then almost lifting off completely as you get more towards the lighter part of the leaves. Okay, and I'll just finish by adding some nice strong shadow tone in here. So this is really dark in this area, really dark green. The more green you've got underneath, the less it will look like black and it will look more like a very dark green. So if you find it just looks a little bit too black, just add a little bit more green colour down, and then you've got a license then to go in as strong and as firmly as you can. All right, so I'm just going to continue working around here and this area as well, and obviously the left-hand side or the right-hand side. If there's anything different to what I've done there, what I'll do is I'll come back in and explain that. But what I think is best is to get everything in this sort of a style here, and then maybe assess it as a whole. Do you need to add some more darks? And that's the time I think when we'll come back in and explain that. So join me in a moment and we'll put the rest of these lettuce leaves in. All right, so just finishing up the lettuce then with some darker shades of black, some of the darkest shadows in there, and pretty much exactly the same as the area over here. So laying down your lightest green first, then a slightly darker green for some of those shadow areas, then a neutral brown for even darker shadow tones, and for the darkest ones, the black. I did use this yellow just to pick out a few little edges of the lettuce leaves, and I put that in first. I did get a little bit sloppy, a bit lazy around this area. Probably a good idea to get a break if you start to feel that way. I'm trying to do this within a time limit, so I got a little bit lazy. I'm not too keen on that area there, but I think this one and this one works okay. That one there was just a little bit more defocused. So you can see I haven't put as many strong darks in the background there because I want it to stay into the background. But it's it's relatively an easy sort of texture and layering of colours to get down. It's certainly less intricate than the burger, even the bun. And talking of the bun, all we've got to do now is finish this bottom layer. So what I'm going to do is just put in, quickly put in the same colours as I used for this one. So we'll start with the white in the lightest areas. We'll go to that yellow, and then that, we'll call it a bun colour. So those three colours predominantly, maybe some of the darker brown, the ochre there, just for where there's some shadow tones. And then we'll just come in and talk about maybe a few little details, look at the image as a whole, see if there's anything we need improving, and that will be it complete. All right, so that has gone in really quickly, much quicker to do than this area here because we've not got to dodge in and out of all the different seeds. So exactly the same process, laying down the colours in the same order, starting with the white, then a bit of yellow, then a bit of this tan colour, this bun colour, and then a little bit of the walnut brown on top where needed, looking at how this area is the lightest and then moving around into where it gets darker. And then I'm just going to go in with the walnut brown so I can just bring up the darks right where the leaves meet. Maybe there's a little bit of shadow just being cast by those leaves, but quite dark in that area. And this walnut brown I'm going to take just over this whiter area at the bottom as well. I will go back over with the white just to bring the colour back to what it is, but I just want to take some of the kind of the brightness away from that. It's a little bit too luminous, especially in this area. Okay, and then we can push the white with a little bit more pressure now. And all it does is it just dulls the white down, adds a bit of a grey tone to it, which I think is a little bit more indicative of what the colour is in that area. All right, and then it just needs a couple of little details. So the first one I'm going to put in is just a nice little shadow, strip of shadow just underneath the very bottom edge. This is what they would call an occlusion shadow, and it really is just a thin shadow along the bottom edge there. So I'm not just outlining it really kind of sloppily, I'm trying to do hit and miss areas where the shadow is stronger than elsewhere. And then what we can do is just tease that shadow up, so just create a little bit of a softening off of that edge up into the bottom of the bun. Okay, and then I've got a dark grey here, so I'm just going to soften the shadow just around this bottom bit. It's only a very, very small shadow, so just going to soften that out. And then just with the white, I'm just going to blend that together. So not a lot of pressure because I don't want it to become obviously a white shadow or a light shadow. And it might make it too light, but if that's the case, you can always use a burnisher. And then into the bun, there's just a few of these little kind of crevices. So actually what we'll do is use this ochre colour first. So we'll put that down. It is a bit more of a grey colour on there, but I'm going to stick to the colours I've got. A little bit of an edge under here. And then with the ochre, maybe just strengthen just in the centre.
All right, so I hope you enjoyed that lesson. Please do let me know in the comments below whether you've had a go with this or whether you plan to have a go with this and how you found it. Was it easy? Was it difficult? Anything that you found particularly challenging? It's always great to get your feedback. If you would like to join me on my premium drawing course, you'll find that over at drawawesome.com. It's where we take you through a program of weekly drawing projects kind of build you from whatever level you're at right now, even if that's a beginner, all the way through. The aim is to get you all the way through to a really accomplished, awesome artist. And we do that through regular weekly drawing projects. So if you're interested in that, head over to www.drawawesome.com, and also maybe consider checking out artcooler.com as well. So Artcooler is our free community for leisure and hobby artists of any ability. Doesn't matter what standard you're at, even if you're a professional, you're welcome there as well. And it's just a place where you can share your artwork with other people on the same journey as you. You get to see their artwork. It's kind of helps to inspire you, give you some creative ideas. We've got monthly challenges there as well, and lots of free drawing lessons on there as well. Okay, so thanks again for joining me on this lesson. Hit the subscribe button on the channel if you haven't already, and you're going to get notified as soon as I upload a new art lesson. Hopefully it won't be too long. But until then, until next time, take care and enjoy your art.